Jerry, are you still there? Oh, it's live. Great. Hi, May. How are you?
Hi, Nadia. How are you doing? Thank you for having me here.
Of course, it's really nice to see you. And I know today we're going to talk a bunch of different things, and especially the new movement and new boom of family offices and a lot of capital money in motion in Singapore. So looking forward to hearing your insights on that regard. But first of
Exactly.
all, we always have to put out a disclaimer. So let me get that out of the way, and we will have May introduce yourself. So very brief, very quick. In terms of a disclaimer, we're here to educate the market. We're here to tell people how to look at the macro market and as well as how to handle your own investment. So this is educational only. It's not financial advice or investment advice. You should do your own research, but we always hope this is helpful for the audience. So, May, you are our honored speaker today, and I know you have a bunch of different things on your belt from your past career. You were at Big Four, Deloitte, KPMG. You were also at pharmaceutical companies, and now you are a partner at an accounting firm. So, tell us about yourself and how you are working, with so many global companies, cross-border companies. Excited to learn about your story.
Thank you, Nadia. I just want to give you a quick introduction of myself and our firm. I am May Huang. I'm the partner working for WWC Professional Corporation. Currently, we are in New York. We are a global firm with different offices across the globe, including Silicon Valley, LA, New York, Hong Kong, Beijing, Singapore, Taiwan, and Japan. And this is why we have the hot topics here is about Singapore.
Thank you, May. So looking at this map, it is very international. By the way, May, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Okay. We are a global boutique firm. Actually, we are focusing on the Southeast Asia market as well as the US market. So maybe Jerry can go back to the slide that with my introduction. Yeah. So we specialize in IPO, pre-IPO assessment, fractional CFO, consulting service, accounting, audit, and tax advisory compliance. With myself, as you just mentioned, Nadia, I have more than 20 years experience working in accounting audit with the Big Four, the global firms. So I grew up in China and came to the US in 1998. And after I graduated from school, I got my CPA and also started my career with Deloitte. I stayed with Deloitte for more than 10 years, and I worked for KPMG, IMA, private industries, as well as regional firms, including Freeman and Taiho Oncology, a pharmaceutical company. I did not move across, so I moved laterally. The reason why, because it was a learning. Life is a learning for me. So I carried a lot of the different knowledge from the larger firms. So I got the larger firm expertise. Now I'm working for a small firm with a small firm feel, which is more agile, also more personal, family environment. And then I'm always interested in the entrepreneurship, that how you can apply what you learned from the larger companies to help the small, medium services companies. That's the reason why I joined the Sino-American Pharmaceutical Industry Association. I volunteered there, and I also coach the Asian women in the accounting field. So that's how I met Mark, who is the founder of Bridgepoint Capital.
Got it. Yeah, this is a very diverse background. Thank you, May, for sharing that with us. And we're very familiar with SAPA, and SAPA has been really great in terms of coaching people up in the pharmaceutical, healthcare, or biotechnology industry, especially focused on Asian Americans. So love Sapa, and thank you for mentioning them. So right now, I think for this podcast, we want to talk a little bit about Singapore. And we all know Singapore has a lot of things going on. I just got back from Singapore myself with a 2 or 3 weeks trip there. And so many people were there attending different conferences. And I heard from the Singapore Economic Development Board that a lot of family offices were moving that way. I see on this slide, you have 400 family offices in Singapore back in 2020. I believe by the end of 2021, there were 700 family offices already. So within 1 year, 300 family offices were established there, and that was back in 2021. This year is even more, right? So what do you see as a general trend from your interactions with Asian family offices, Asian enterprises, in terms of how capitals are moving, how money is in motion? What is your general impression?
Yeah. We have the office in Singapore, and we do see a lot of the business growing in Singapore, and the movement of the family office in Singapore. So there are needs of the service companies in Singapore. And also, as you can see, the Hong Kong asset managers are going to Singapore to search for the potential customers. Right. And also, the relationship in between China and the US, what's happening in Beijing right now, that in the past couple of years, because of the lockdown and then the zero policy COVID, that makes the wealth or the moderate wealth to move from China to Singapore. So there are a lot of the needs of the wealth management services in Singapore. And then also we're going to also touch upon the environment, the business environment in Singapore, what makes the rise of the Singapore and what attracts the people to Singapore. So what we can see is that we had to see a lot of the investments moving from mainland China to Singapore, including the larger companies, particularly in the technology, cryptocurrency space. We have, as we can see, we have Tencent, Alibaba. They already increased the presence in Singapore, and also the parent of TikTok, ByteDance, also invested billions of dollars in Singapore. In the past 2 years, there was also the largest Chinese fast fashion giant called Shein, who is also moving into Singapore. So on their LinkedIn right now, their headquarters is listed as Singapore. And in addition to that, the founder and the CEO, who is Chris Xu, and who just became a permanent resident. So as you can see, we get to see the people, they migrate into Singapore, and then that caused the booming of the family office and the investment and pouring of the capitals into Singapore.
Got it. So yeah, all of these are, the observations that are great for our audience. So many tech companies are moving that way. And you mentioned a little bit about the why, right? So the crackdown in China, the tension between China and the West, Singapore is still very neutral. And of course, Singapore has a big talent pool and very strong and robust systems there already for people to tap into when they want to conduct a business, such as setting up their family offices or continue and moving their businesses, a tech firm, for example, to Singapore and continue their operations there. But are there anything else? Tell us a little bit more. Why do you think Singapore is rising? Why do you think Singapore is booming so fast?
Okay, yeah, the rise of the Singapore attributes to the following. As you just mentioned, there are global talents, right, in Singapore, and then the open environment, the support of the government, including the strong rules and the laws and regulation, and then also the tax. From the tax side, it is also safe haven, tax haven, that across the board interest actually. So the tax rate is 17%, and then also they also provide stimulation for the startup companies to get the partial tax exemption. So the environment really supports the entrepreneurs and then the startup companies from business and tax laws and regulatory environment standpoint of view.
Yeah, and my personal feeling in regards to how service-oriented the Singapore Economic Development Board is they attracted the best talent to work for the EDB, right? And they really position themselves as what can we do for these companies when you are coming to Singapore. They really put out all kind of roadmap and support for these technology companies. I believe that's also another reason why it's attracting so many companies and family offices and investment firms there.
Yeah, historically, the Asian countries back in the 2000s, there were the four dragons, including Singapore was the number one, the fast growing country in the world, actually. And then also it always provides a neutral base for the trading tension in between the China and the US, so that the Singapore side gets the benefit when there was tension in between China and the US.
So I can't help asking you this. We all know the big Congress conference is happening right now in China, and this is his third term. The conference is still going on, but he has delivered his speech, which lasted for 2 hours. It's a little shorter than last time, which was a 3.5-hour long speech. But any surprises there in terms of his vision for China?
Yeah, as we just saw from the social media, in China, the 20th Congress of the China Communist Party, it is really happening right now this week. So we are looking for a third term for Xi to continue his position as the president, and Xi has set China on an increasingly very controlled path, as was before. The economy was very open, attracts a lot of the foreign investment. So in the tone from the top, from his speech, sounds like it is more controlled environment, also concern about the national security. So as we can see that the focus is on the common prosperity, that the country will focus on the national security, and also the lockdown, the zero COVID, or supports the environment is going to be very stringent. And also on the regulatory side is going to put a lot of the limits on the companies to grow. That is the tone that we read from his speech this week.
We all know the zero COVID policy is going to continue, and it's driving a lot of anxiety, and it's definitely impacting the economy. What's your view on that? And also, I guess from your from what you can see, how is that impacting the cross-border businesses? Because you are working with a lot of them.
Yeah, it does impact the business that we because as for us, our focus is the cross-border transactions, and also from the personal side, that a lot of people are on the radar screen, that they are monitoring the Communist Party meeting. They're trying to find out what's going on, what we are going to do. So a lot of people just put the travel on hold as well, that to wait until the meeting is over to go back to China. And then also because of the zero policy, right, on COVID, so that the people there, they got tested, every day and on a weekly basis to report, if you are COVID free. That does put a lot of the pressure that, everybody wants freedom. So then people just feel it's not very comfortable, and then also not very convenient that their life is 24 hours being monitored. So as the business feels the same way, is really the balance in between control as well as freedom.
Yeah, we're going to get into the challenges a little bit more just in a little bit. But I see you have on the slide Ukraine war and global recession. And I think China is definitely slowing down, as we can tell from a lot of the data. And that's going to contribute back to a further slowing down, especially in Europe. And with the Ukraine war and energy crisis in Europe, things are looking very gloomy right now. How is that impacting the global and international cross-border businesses that you're working with?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of the tension going on, within the geopolitical environment. That also leads to the risk, right? What is the risk appetite of the investors and then the companies? We all wanted to have peace because you need to grow the company. The company's main goal is to grow, and then also the investors are looking at the capital market. So we need a very stabilized environment so that the business can grow. So this is a very interesting time that you can see there's so much going on in the world, in Singapore, across the globe, and also in the US as well. There's a stimulation of the concern about the global recession, and then also the newly released Inflation Reduction Act that promotes the rebate for the actually, so the greenhouse, the energy that. So this is the movement. Actually, what's going on is the regulatory environment will put more regulation on the ESG, the reporting requirement, how company would go IPO. This would all be impacted. And in the meantime, how would you be able to help the company to grow so that the economy can survive, right? Also thrive in this environment. So there's a lot of the uncertainty, and in China we call risk and also the opportunity is always correlated. So how we will be able to embrace the uncertainty and also look at the opportunities in Southeast Asia, in different countries, look at the cross-border transactions, right? So that's how we will be able to continue monitoring and also, look at the long-term, what is the long-term goal of the companies.
Yeah, so I think there's a saying where investors and technology firms, people in the market, players in the market, they can handle good news, they can handle bad news, but they can't really handle the uncertainty, right? So one of the reasons contributing to Singapore's boom and similar places, they're on the rise, like Singapore is becoming a Switzerland in Asia, is also because they are more certain, they have a more stable political environment and economical environment as well. So with all these challenges, can we talk a little bit more about, how these enterprises should be reacting to it, and what kind of things should they pay attention to, using your word, to continue to thrive?
Yeah. So companies will continue facing challenges, and this is why we see, right? When the companies they release, the annual report and then also the registration statement, and you can always see pages and pages of the risks, right? You put it's including the external and internal risks. So the capital is always needed to grow the business. 70% of the time when the companies fail, it's because it's lack of capital. So that's why we are focusing on the capital market. And also the company's mission, vision, the goal is really to grow and increase revenue, reduce cost, right? How would they grow is always through the merger acquisition, the cross-border transactions, the merger acquisition. How you can build a synergy, put the ice cream or vanilla together and make a new company. How we can be complementary to each other. How we can get bigger, right? Sometimes it's too big to fail. So this is always the ultimate goal of the companies, is to grow and then and get bigger. and the other thing is the regulatory environment. So the regulatory environment is always going to be there for the legal compliance environment. So this is also going to, decide, how the capital market will go. For example, right? Right now we put the requirement for ESG, environment, social governance, in the requirement of those companies. So it's not just the requirement of to be listed on NASDAQ or IPO process. It is not just the numbers, but also the social impact. So there are a lot of the regulatory requirement that also will be put in place. That's why it makes the business environment very dynamic, that companies just needed to monitor more KPIs, right? Not just the EBITDA, the revenue and the cost of goods. So also there's when you look at the potential of the business risks, the companies are also facing internal, external risks to put the internal controls in place, particularly when the companies is a startup, the emerging growth companies. You don't have the capital to build the internal controls. You don't have a big team of the accounting team to put the books together. You might just have to have very limited resource to grow as a company, right? And then also get the capital and grow the business at the same time. So this is always what the companies are struggling and trying to survive and then thrive with this environment. So we need a more supportive environment to help the company grow for the small and emerging companies.
So May, we also work with a lot of small and emerging companies here. One thing is we invest in them. Another thing is we do a little bit of consulting, cross-border consulting for these companies. One thing we realized is, prior to, let's say, the tech crackdown in China, people really are considering going to China more proactively because there's a big market there, huge demand, and I would say Asia in general, right? But when the crackdown happened and when there are a lot of certainties taking place, people are pulling back a little bit and staying on the sidelines and trying to figure out what is a good timing to go to the Asia market. And to begin with, a lot of these founders are from the US or from Europe, and they are not able to navigate Asia that well. So staying on the sidelines is kind of a good move because of the uncertainties there. But now, things are changing, especially with Singapore's booming. Any advice for this type of companies, or any case studies or examples that you've seen where small business are adjusting their policies or their strategies to adapt into these challenges?
Yeah, Nadia, as what you guys help the startup companies, and also you're interested in also small mid-cap companies. Our firm, WWC, is also a boutique, right, CPA firm, but we're a global firm. We have different offices in Southeast Asia and also in the US. So this is always also our goal and mission, is to be able to grow with the startup, small medium companies, and we have the bigger company expertise, and then the small company feel. So the advice would be, companies be agile and nimble, and then also look at the different stock exchange. And I just want to touch upon later is the listing environment, in the different countries. And then also what we have seen is, the companies, they are dual listed and then also triple listed in different stock exchanges. So there are right, there are things that the companies will continue monitoring, is really their safeguard. Yeah, their internal controls, as well as how they would grab the opportunity, which is, what the technology or crypto, all blockchain, all the new things, that's a trend. This is going to be the future, and this is a real thing that's happening.
Got it. So you mentioned IPO, you mentioned let's say the public market. So I think Singapore, to begin with, they're not the largest stock exchange, but they're definitely making moves as well to be more integrated with the global stock exchanges such as NYSE and many of them here in the US. So what do you see there in terms of the Singapore exchange and small business, mid-cap business, and bigger business starting to consider their exit? Should they choose Singapore?
Yeah, absolutely. People need to be open-minded, look at different stock exchange, and then the current environment. Right now, the IPO is low, very, very low. So in the past year, comparing with the year before. So right now, when you look at the different stock exchanges and then the IPOs, people always prepare, right? You always prepare for the IPO 2 or 3 years before, because the registration, the release, you need to have 3 years financials. So people needed to look at the long term. What is the benefit of going IPO? Do you need a capital, or do you need a brand? What is your strategy? What is your long-term strategy of getting into the market in Asia? What is the capital? So this is all the different things that they needed to consider. And from auditors' observation, is we do get to see the Singapore companies going IPO in NASDAQ, doing SPAC, and SPAC has been very popular in the past years during the pandemic. So this is what we have seen is also the Chinese companies going IPO, listed on Singapore Stock Exchange. And also I will just talk about the environment, the PCOB, who is the watchdog of the audit firms, that because the U.S. PCOB cannot get to inspect those U.S. listed Chinese companies to be able to inspect them, so that the companies, those Chinese companies, are facing the risk of being delisted from NASDAQ. So then those companies are also thinking about what the alternative is. That's what we see, that they are moving into Singapore or Hong Kong. So this is definitely the trend that based on the reality. Okay.
Let's say if I'm a US company, technology company, and I plan to have operations and businesses in Asia. So if I'm considering going IPO, what choices do I have, and what kind of preparation do I need to do?
Okay, yeah. So there are different listing requirements. So here's what we have listed, right? For the the first one is Singapore Stock Exchange, and then NASDAQ, and then the China main board, and the next one is the Hong Kong main board. And based on the different markets, there are different appetite of the investors. And for example, some of them, in Singapore, historically has been interest of healthcare, technology, and so there are just a different investor appetite from different regions. And then there are companies that we see that they have been dual listed or triple listed, as I just mentioned.
Got it. What if I'm a Chinese company and I want to get listed overseas? It sounds like there will be challenges in terms of the auditing, in terms of how to prepare the paperwork. But I know the VIE structure used to be very popular. Does that still work now for Chinese company to go overseas?
Yeah. So we also listed, right, one of the challenges that we have is the business structure. The VIE was very popular, the offshore, but then it turns out to be, the government, like, neither the Chinese or the U.S. government would like it, right? So right now we get to see like more companies that they just separate, right, the China part and then the U.S. part, so that we will be a standalone company, just to reduce the risk of being, inspected, or the relationship, because, being, right, censored or filtered by, the sensitivity of the technology and the access and the patent. There are a lot of the issues that the companies are facing, the surface, right, from the US.
Right.
So all the scrutiny from the different governments, that how you can, better protect yourself and then also attract the capital, right?
Got it. So I know you have a couple of examples of companies that are dual listed or triple listed. Maybe let's go to the next slide. Anything, May, you want to share with the audience here? For example, NEO, it seems like they're making moves to be triple listed. What else would you like to share with the audience?
Yeah, so it is very interesting that NEO, which is the leading company in the the electric vehicle EV market, now they are triple listed on Nasdaq, right, the Singapore Stock Exchange, as well as the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And then we also get to see a lot of the technology startups in Southeast Asia. They are growing remarkably, including, in Singapore, there are unicorns going to US for a better liquidity and then valuation point. And also in the past week, there are actually two companies got approved, which is the crypto exchange, including the right, Coinbase, and also blockchain. So those are just the signs that the Singapore government is being very supportive of the technology focus, and also is very welcoming, right, the trend of the investment, actually, as what we just said, the booming of the family offices, the investment happening in that region.
Got it. You also mentioned DBS, which is one of the biggest banks there in Singapore. They're also integrating a lot of cryptocurrency blockchain technologies into their operations as well. Anything you want to share there in regards to DBS?
Okay. Yeah. So in Singapore, so there's always the very, right, the welcoming environment. They are very cryptocurrency friendly country. So the bank, right, the largest bank, which is the DBS, that they also expand its Bitcoin cryptocurrency, the trading services. This just tells us that this is a sign of the investment, the capital, how, because there is a need in that area. That's the reason why they expanded the service.
Right. Just zooming out a little bit across different industries, because I know you work with many different firms in different industries. What do you see as an appetite there from Singapore's standpoint, investor standpoint? Because we want to tell businesses here in the US, technology firms, or in other industries, including maybe biotech, healthcare, is Singapore a good source for capital for firms that are based in the US? And if so, what industries is in favor right now?
Yeah. What we have seen is a lot of the technology companies, healthcare, and also the family office, real estate, and because my last bullet point here is the PCOB cannot inspect the auditors report for those U.S. listed, Chinese companies. That makes the China, the movement of the fund from China to go to, the listing on Singapore Stock Exchange. So, And then also recently what's happening is that right now there was a negotiation, there was agreement that was reached actually. So the China side is sending the regulators to Hong Kong for those for the selected companies, so that the PCOB will be able to inspect those companies. So the companies, they are facing the risk of being delisted. Actually, it's quite a lot because there's more than 2 trillion, right, US dollar. That's the amount of the capital that's in the US market. So then now what is the alternative, right, for those companies to be facing the risk of being delisted? That includes Alibaba and
Right.
others.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like technology firms is still, very promising if they want to go to Singapore, but they just have to be careful in terms of choosing the process to make the move there. Is that fair
Yeah.
to say?
Yes, and then also in between China and US right now, it's very sensitive that the on the US side, right, US does not give access to the Chinese companies when when it comes to the certain technology or IP, or so this is real thing that's happening that would make the Chinese companies to look at what is the more neutral, friendly market, which
Mm-hmm.
Singapore stock exchange is going to benefit.
Great. I know you have some fun facts to share in the next slide.
Oh yeah, so this is actually I pulled it from Wall Street Journal back in as you can see. So this is the Wall Street Journal from 1999. It talks about the Singapore is still the most competitive economy. Back then, when you see, Singapore is the number one, and United States is the number two. So, and then also the other Asian countries, including Hong Kong and Taiwan. Yeah.
Very interesting. This is from 1999, and Singapore was already up there on the list, and now they still are.
Yeah, it feels like it is a renaissance, right?
Yes, absolutely. So
Going back to
mhm.
yeah. Okay.
No, go ahead, May. Sorry.
Yeah, so yeah, as I just mentioned, yeah, this is the Singapore is the we get to see the family office booming in that area, in that region, and also the investment in the digital entertainment, e-commerce, the digital financial service businesses, the banks, right, and then also like the video games. It is all technology driven. So this is very actually exciting because this is really what the future is going to be. To have including those companies that have the technology, automation, the digitalization, that you embrace the changes, and also how are you going to be able to scale right to the market quickly.
Yep. Well said. Thank you, May. So my next few questions is a little bit more on the personal side, just because I think you have a very interesting career. And by the way, if any questions from the audience, now is the time to post those questions in the chat box, and we'll pick them up towards the end of the show. So May, we mentioned Singapore many times today. That's the topic for today. But if you are a entrepreneur, would you consider moving to Singapore or to Asia in general, Southeast Asia or India or anywhere to establish your business?
Yeah, why not? I've been to Singapore, I've been to India, and I know people always get scared about a new environment. And I was there. For example, I was in India twice. I never got sick, and people are very friendly and also very innovative. And then you get to see a lot of the energy over there, right? A lot of the conferences. With my bilingual and Asian background, definitely I get to see what the movement is. And actually, one of the partner I have worked with, who was who worked at Deloitte right now, he's a Caucasian. Right now, he's in Singapore building a startup, which is insurance technology company over there. So it is definitely, I can see, people are going to move there because, a lot of people move to China and because of the lockdown and then the environment right now. So right now, the alternative would be other countries, right? What countries are welcoming the entrepreneurs? I would think, you wanted to go to an environment that you can, thrive and then be successful.
It's really great that people on the ground in Singapore and give us the I'd say the first-hand information in terms of what it's like living there in Singapore and having a business, building a business. So just based on my 2 weeks trip there, I see a lot of people are moving there. So you need to get an employer pass, basically, approved by the government, similar to a visa here to work there long term. And the queue for that one is already very long. Housing prices is also on the rise in Singapore. Rent has doubled in a recent few months. That's how much in demand Singapore is in terms of just the talents flushing in. And even during those conferences, the hotel rooms are going up in prices as well, and a lot of traffic. So that's another thing, right? So Singapore is a very small place. So hopefully with the service-oriented spirit that the government has and a lot of local people have, hopefully they can hold this influx of talents and influx of technology firms to survive and thrive there.
Yeah, definitely. As you just mentioned, Nadia, is really the talent, where the talent goes. And during the pandemic, we get to see, right? The technology people move from Silicon Valley to California, from Silicon Valley, California, to Texas, to Florida, because So this is the same thing that we see is a movement of the talent, right? Will be in Singapore. And I used to work for a not-for-profit organization called the Institute of Management Accountant. So actually in Asia, when I went to China, went to India, the conferences that we organized over there were thousands of people, and then also people are very passionate about learning the technology, the innovation. And then the chapters in the US, when I go to those chapters, there are not that many people. It just feels like the movement is really in the east, moving from the west to the east, and then people get so excited, and then it is really interesting that we get to see the movement.
You mentioned SAPA earlier. Hopefully SAPA will be considering setting up a chapter in Singapore in the near future as well.
Yeah, I would be the first one to volunteer and go there.
Wonderful. And just going back a little bit in terms of your career, your background, we are both originally from China. We are both female. We are both minority working in financial services industry. Any advice for either executives in financial services with similar backgrounds, female executives or female entrepreneurs? Anything you want to share with this group of people?
Yeah, this is very interesting because actually outside of my work, I am a part-time coach. So I coach, the young Asian women in accounting, because I have navigated in my career that I always share my experience with the younger generation is really to network and then also to pivot yourself. And I started as a CPA, and later on, actually, I got my IT audit certificate that makes me work in the IT technology area, because I was very interested in knowing the database, and also I believe women in technology. So I believe this is a lifelong learning, and then also smart people think alike, and then through the networking I get to meet very smart people, and then also along the way you get to help other people. So this is really a people help people business, as we are all in the service industry. So I think being a servant, and now we're talking about authentic leadership, servant leadership. It is really you walk the talk, right? How you are going to learn about your life's experience, and then is there a dead end, or what is, sometimes you just end up doing the same thing 5 times, and then 20 years goes by. So I realize, I think because everybody, you would have your own DNA. So being a minority, as you just mentioned, we do not have any role models. So we are our own role models, and then we support each other, and then you build yourself right from scratch, and you still don't know, what you are gonna do when you grow up. So this is a very interesting journey that you get to meet a very exciting, interesting people, and you build a relationship, and you help each other. And so this is really, I think, is really, we see, I think entrepreneurship is really the key, is because you don't have to, build a business, but what you can do is really, I am a self-made partner. I'm a self-made CFO. So, basically right now, right, you can, this whole world is the world is your oyster. You can explore, you can get to find good partners that you can build something together, and then also you can be a good role model to others. So I think this is really my advice, is to continue the journey to learn, and then lead, and then contribute and add value.
Wow, I think that's extremely well said and very inspiring too. And I think especially the part, that the point on continue to learn and really make a role model for yourself, because there are not a lot of role models before us. So the continued learning, always adapting to new things, and so many things are happening around us. This new boom in Singapore, the global recession closing in. And also Web3, cryptocurrency, new technology that's happening every day. All of these are new things to learn and adapt to.
Exactly. It is a very exciting journey, and I believe in technology. I believe in entrepreneurship, and I hope we can all grow together, and then have to grow with the companies, and make a better place. This whole world a better place.
Definitely. Great. So we have a few more slides to quickly go through, and then we'll sum up the session. So the next slide is about diversification, and what we always advocate at Bridgepin Capital. So we mention this every time, by the way, on our podcast, but this is really a way to help our audience, to help our investors to pay attention to your own wealth. We all know inflation is going on. It's forcing everyone to be an investor, because by simply putting your money in a bank, it's going to depreciate, and you just have to invest, and that's why everyone's becoming investors now. A lot of things can be helpful to increase your net worth, such as your tax planning. May, your auditor, you mentioned a lot of smart ways to handle taxes from the enterprise perspective, but there are also a lot of ways to handle taxes from a high net worth perspective or family offices perspective as well. T&E planning together with insurance are very good tools to establish your trust, to pass down your wealth to the next generation. We have this knowledge here, and we're happy to share with anyone who reach out and want to sit down and talk. The next slide, very simple, straightforward. If you have to take one thing away from this slide, just remember diversification is a free lunch. I know a lot of people are making very quick money from cryptocurrency trading, a lot of stock picking activities. We are not really in that field, but more in the long-term field. And people probably would say, long-term value investing, that just works for a certain group of people. But diversification is never going to go wrong. because just by getting money from winning a lottery, a lot of people can't really keep that wealth. But the long-term, diversified, actively managed portfolios, and you really understanding your own portfolio can take a long way. So finally, let's get to the 3 key takeaways. And this is a question we always ask our speaker. May, what kind of things do you want the audience to take away with them today from the things you've shared? And I know we talked a lot about different things, but give us your top 3.
Okay. I think the first one is, Nadia, is Singapore is the center of the move. So everyone put on your radar screen and watch Singapore. And maybe next episode, we're going to find another country. Okay. And yeah. So the second one is, look at we are looking at the relationship in between US and also China. So yeah, Singapore is going to be the alternative heaven, the tax heaven, the technology heaven, and then the regulatory heaven. So we will continue monitoring that. So this is the second takeaway. And then the last one is really to take advantage of the capital move, and then also talk with the service providers, right? The investment bankers, the good lawyers, the good auditors like us. So take advantage of the move, and I hope everyone can find your interest and your curiosity, and then your passion. Okay, thanks.
That's awesome. Thank you for the great summary. All right, so I think we are a little crunched on time, but if you do have questions, feel free to send us an email or reach out to myself or May. Let's see if we can squeeze in one question here. So we'll take 1 or 2 questions and we'll end the session. May, first question, what are some of the options or ways for US local companies to get connected with the resources in Singapore?
Okay, so actually, there's the Singapore Stock Exchange. Actually, it has some of the resources over there, just like the US Stock Exchange. NASDAQ has like the learning courses. It always invites like good people to do the seminar, like us, the online the online video streaming. And also, I think the best way is to connect with us, like Nadia and myself, the service providers, and we can always get you connected and refer you to somebody else, the best, the lawyers, right? The people, in Singapore, if you want to set up a business, to do the restructuring of your business.
Great. And I would just add on top of that, there is a whitelist put out by the Singapore Economic Development Board. There are investors, investment firms to be specific, that are approved by recognized by the Singapore government, and it's public information. You can look it up on the Singapore EDB website. And this is in regards to the second question as well from Xian Zheng. So to get connected with investors, you can look up the investor's name from the whitelist by the Singapore Economic Development Board, and to find the investor that really works for you or your company. We can chat offline. We can help you to navigate who are the investors that are interested in the field that you are working on. So long story short, feel free to get connected. We will guide you and help you to navigate Singapore, Asia, and cross-border. Well, May, I just want to thank you again. This is an awesome session. Really enjoyed talking with you. Really appreciate your time as well, May. And hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Likewise, Nadia. It was very nice working with you. I really enjoyed the conversation, and look forward to meeting you in person.
Sounds good. Bye, May. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.